Cycling Towards Sobriety, featuring Sherry Hoppen. Would riding hundreds of miles on a bicycle lead to sobriety from alcohol use? In Sherry Hoppen's Sober Cycle, pedaling through recovery one day at a time, she describes her journey through alcoholism and recovery. As she pedaled her way through, she dealt with vulnerability, shame, and isolation of hiding her secret of alcohol use. Listen as she talks about the family perspective, what her journey on the bike taught her, whether or not she still rides today, and the passion she shares in helping others. Our guest on this episode is Sherry Hoppen, who has lived in West Michigan her entire life and has traveled extensively throughout the United States and internationally. She has never lived more than 5 miles from her childhood home. She worked in various areas of a pregnancy care ministry for over 10 years, first as a volunteer, then as an employee. She and her husband have 3 adult children and 4 grandchildren and love being active in whatever they do. As empty nesters, they enjoy cycling and finding new trails to explore together. Sherry is an avid reader who loves writing, decorating, and time spent on Michigan's beautiful beaches. Sherry also launched She Surrenders in 2016, a ministry designed to encourage freedom from addiction with biblical truths, a deepening relationship with the Lord, and the fellowship found in a healing community. You can learn more about her by visiting her website, www.shesurrenders.com, or you can go to www.sealesshouserecovery.com. You can also find links to her book, Sober Cycle, in the podcast notes.
This is Talking Addiction and Recovery, the podcast talking, you guessed it, all about addiction and recovery. Join your host, licensed professional counselor Andrew J. Schreier, as he and his guests break down recovery topics with raw honesty, delving into niche conversations around the topics of substance abuse, mental health, and gambling. We intend to meet individuals where they are on their own personal journey of recovery, with dignity, respect, and compassion. We'll do more than talk addiction and recovery. We'll explore it. We're glad you've joined us. Here with today's episode, your host, Andrew Schreier.
Thanks for joining Sherry Hoppen on Talking Addiction and Recovery podcast. I really appreciate you coming on.
Hey, thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, we're going to talk about your book, Sober Cycle, Pedaling Through Recovery One Day at a Time, and some other things that you're doing. Before we dive into the book, can you give listeners a little bit background about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm from Michigan and I'm a wife. I've been married to my husband we just celebrated our 40th, which sounds like we're really old, but we're not. And we have 3 grown children, married. We have 5 grandchildren we just adore. So we're kind of in that stage of life, but we both are still working and doing life with our family. And we're a busy family, and that's okay. And the other thing on my personal life, we are a family that is very supportive in the addiction and recovery world, having lived through it ourselves a couple times, both with me and another family member. And so that's kind of where my story begins and where my career is today.
That's an amazing way to introduce yourself in that way. I don't think I've heard a lot of people reference the coming from a family perspective on that the lived experience with addiction and the family part of it. Like normally it's like the person will identify themselves or they know someone, but you made a point to really mention that the family itself comes from that. Can is there any more to that, or can you?
Well, yeah. There's a lot of addiction in my family, growing up and extended family. But I truly believe in, and everybody knows this, when there's addiction in the family and active addiction, so like in my case as mom, it affects everybody. And even if they say it's not affecting them, kids are like, it didn't bother me. I didn't even know, or anything like, you hear that once in a while, but it does because there's an underlying current of something is wrong and you don't know what it is, or you do know what it is. But my point is that it's not normal behavior. And so everybody's affected negatively. But on the other side, in recovery, everybody's affected positively. And I see, as I was healing and growing and finding a joy and freedom in life that I had never experienced before, I watched my family grow as well and start to be released from a lot of the bondage that they'd been in as well, and didn't even really realize that they were in. So we're a family that um, we recognize what addiction can do to the family, but we also realize what recovery can do to a family.
I remember I used to work at a program where we would once a month invite family members to come for like a family day. And it would
Hmm.
be, a couple hours. We would do like a couple presentations. We would do some exercises. We have like a couple different individuals come. And I remember that we had a licensed family therapist who would come and they would have everyone sit in a circle, right? Like this is definitely what LMFT is going to do.
Hmm.
And she would have everyone sit in a circle and she would take out this big thing of yarn, this giant ball of yarn. And she would start talking about families and systems, and she would start passing around this yarn for people to hold on to. And she was like, just keep passing it around. And then when everyone had some yarn in a big circle, she would keep talking, but she would start doing things with the yarn. And she would start pulling on it and and dragging it.
Oh.
And what you would notice is everyone was doing something kind of different. Some people were
Hmm.
kind of like, all right, I'm just gonna hold it and let it go. Some people were trying to like hold on to it and
Hmm.
um, prevent it from going. Some were trying to like pull it the other way. There were some who are like, just drop the string, right? They just like drop the string. And she would always illustrate that like when something, like addiction is going on in a family system, like it impacts everyone in some way, but it's different. How we react to it is different. How it affects us is different. Some are holding on tight because
Hmm.
they feel like they're the ones that has to, while other ones let go entirely. But it always it always made a really good demonstration for all the families and individuals about that even though it's one person's behavior that is usually getting center stage or more attention,
Hmm.
that it is impacting everyone to some degree, that no one here in this circle can say that this isn't affecting me
Hmm.
being a part of that. So I always appreciated that.
Well, it's true too that, so like in my case, being the one that, had to do, the recovery work, it would not be a fair statement to say, so I did all, I did not go to rehab at the time, but say I had, and many women do. So let's just say, for instance, mom leaves, goes to rehab, comes back and walks into the home, and absolutely nothing has changed there because she, in their mind, had to go away and get better and change things. But in their eyes, they probably didn't think they had to do anything different. So she's walking back into the same scenario that she was in before. And the chances of the family going back down are pretty good.
Right.
So I feel like when she starts healing, everybody needs direction and everybody needs the help. And it's interesting how oblivious the whole family is to that. Because so my youngest daughter, who's now she was about 14 at the time, and she's a master's level therapist. And she said to me after reading my book, yeah, yeah, I know everybody's like probably needed a family therapist, but yes, we did. But anyway, um, she said, and it was so interesting. And I even thought about it as in my childhood. She said, you know what we've never thought of as children? There is always a backstory going on in the home, in our parents' lives that most of us will know nothing about. She says, yes, yours was major. You were an alcoholic. But most of them never, most children are never privy to what really went on in the home if it doesn't come out like that, even if it, especially if it wasn't one that, needed treatment or anything like that. But she said, because you wrote a book, I know a lot more than what I planned on. But she said, it's just so interesting to me that as a child, you just have this assumption that everything is fine and everything's
Hmm.
okay because of what you see, and what your parents hide from you.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was such an interesting observation because I thought, yeah, I get it because that's how I grew up.
Hmm.
And it wasn't okay.
Yeah. In your book, when you talk about your book, the sober cycle, when I got it, I was like, this has got to be different than a lot of other books I've read because of
Yeah.
the cycling and going through all that. So I was like, right away, this is gonna be quite different than some of the other stories and guests that I've had on. So where to begin? How do you tell audiences about sober cycle before we dive into some specifics in the book?
Well, first of all, I guess I'll ask you, so did it disappoint? Were you like spot on? It was different?
Yeah, when I
Um,
started reading, because I was like, is this going to be, go on this cycling adventure and then get this moment of like
yeah.
complete transformation?
Hallmark.
And yeah, like that's where I was like, is this what this is going to end up? But then like I'm reading about it like right away. So I'm like, well, there's no way like there's going to be this event that happens at the get-go and
Yeah.
then
It'd be
what's
too
what's
short.
what's the rest of the book going to be? So right away I was like, oh, this isn't like this is the end part of the book where this is happening where I was
Hmm.
thinking maybe it was going to lead up to like your story, what was going on, then here's this event where you did this and then transformation and everything is on a different path. So to read it right from the beginning definitely like caught me off guard from what I was just anticipating the book was going to be, which is great because I think sometimes there is that waiting for this transformation to occur
Hmm.
and this moment where it's going to be this great thing and that does happen, but for a lot of people, for most people, change in doing things differently is from several attempts and
Hmm.
a lot of tries, instead of just that, oh well, this moment happened where I'm now changed. So
Yes.
it did catch me off guard as soon as I started reading it, and then oh, this didn't happen that way.
No. And that was part of, that was the goal because I had read, first of all, very few books written. I think I read one by a Christian woman. Um, and this is now a couple years. Well, I've been sober since 2013. So then, there was one other one that I found at the time, written by a woman of faith hiding her addiction to alcohol. So when I made up my mind that I was going to write this story, um, I told myself a couple things. I'm going to be real, and I'm going to say it like it is because I knew that I wasn't the only one thinking this way and doing the things that I did. Not necessarily the crazy bike ride, but um, saying and doing the things that I did and hiding the way I did. And I wanted to appeal to that vulnerability in women as they read it, so they could just have those gasping moments of she gets it. And I started where I did in the book because honestly, I was kind of sick of reading books where, sober up and there's 4 pages left in the book. I wanted to know what kept happening a little bit, or did she relapse, or
Yeah, that
sometimes
happens
I'd
so
look
much where
yeah,
it's
I'd
like
look the author up online and I'm like, yeah, she relapsed twice. That's sad, but she picked herself back up. But, it's like there's always more to the story. So, yeah, I didn't want a Hallmark book by any means. So, yeah, so the book starts out. Um,
I mean, at
I am,
page 16, I guarded my secret so closely that I was choosing to suffer through 100 miles a day on a bike rather than expose myself. I mean, that was very early in the book.
yeah,
We were
I
talking about that.
started, yeah, I mean, leading up to it, I mean, this is still a couple years, 3 years before I would be sober for good. And um, to know that if I would have known at that moment I would keep going for 3 more years, I probably would have got off that dang bike. But um, I was challenged to do a bike ride for the nonprofit that I worked for. I worked for a Christian pregnancy center, and I had been asked. I had kind of like word vomited one day in the office to the executive director that I was in bad shape and was having a hard time. And I had never done that before. And I was mortified that I did, but it was a cry for help. And he just looked at me and he said, "You need to do the ride for life." And I'm like, "What?" Because the ride for life was this crazy thing that they had only done once before. And that was when like four guys hopped on bikes, pedal bikes, not e-bikes, and went from Michigan to Baltimore. And I thought that was nuts. And he says, "We're going from Michigan to Texas this year and we need more women." And I looked at him and I go, "No." And he's like, "You need to think about it." Well, this guy's a pastor, so you feel like he's a little more godly than most. So you don't exactly feel like you're supposed to say no that easily. But I said no. And then I'm like, I mean, yeah, no, like I'm not doing it. But honestly, for like 10 days, I woke up every night and God was like, "You need to do this." And then my husband got on board. Next thing I know, I own a blue bike with the skinniest tires I've ever seen. And I'm training and I have 51 days. And I will tell you, I was in the worst shape of my life when I started training for that. And it was truly an act of God that I was able to even be ready for it. But that was a summer that I had a little more hope for my future than I had had in a long time. And I stayed sober more often, not all the time, but leading up to it, a couple days before we left, I started binge drinking and I just totally let fear dive in. And when I left for that bike trip, absolutely nobody knew that I was experiencing probably the worst hangover I've ever had in my life. And I had to get on a bike. And the book kind of, the first half of the book chronicles that bike ride. And those first 300 miles were absolutely awful.
And
And
you almost had every reason not to. Like you had every reason why it could have been a no, not going to do that. Not, I mean, there could have
mhm,
been so many reasons to
mhm.
why that was something to not do. I'm sure this has gone in your head and your mind several times, but what was it that made this to be where it wasn't, you didn't take those reasons to not do it. You did do something that a lot of people would look at and be like, why would you do that? Doesn't sound good. Why would you do
Mhm.
that? And you went that way
Well,
to do this.
to the to people that, were in my circle or knew us. So it was a fundraiser. So it looked like I was passionately raising money for um, to save babies, for the battle raging against abortion. And it, truthfully, there was two things. This was going to save me and cure me from drinking. Um, I was gonna, be fit and I was gonna feel good about myself. I would also be on a bike for 2 weeks. I wouldn't drink. And I would come home with no desire to drink because I was doing this and I kind of made a bargain with God. I'm doing this for you. And I'm sure this is how it's supposed to be. I said yes, I'm being obedient. Surely I will be finally let off the hook from this awful addiction. The second thing is, people are starting to get suspicious of my drinking. And I know people are talking. I had a few friends get in my face and, some family members question. And I thought, if I do this, surely this will prove to them there's no way I could be an alcoholic. 'Cause alcoholics can't get on a bike and
Can't do
ride a
that.
thousand miles.
Yeah.
So, two very selfish reasons. And neither one of them worked. So, Um, and I didn't get really fit either because we ate like pigs the whole time on that bike trip. So, but what did happen on that bike trip was 2 weeks of no alcohol, but 2 weeks of also being with these amazing Christian people that I got to know on this trip that I could be authentically myself. And I hadn't been authentically myself without alcohol for a very long time. And I did. It was the beginning of some healing because I caught a glimpse of who I could be. And she was better than I thought she could be because I didn't think I could be any fun or of any interest to anybody without alcohol. I thought alcohol was what made me. And
Yeah,
that,
I'm curious about the part where the authentic part comes in because we were talking before about I've done like ultra events, and there are times where I feel like it gets to that point where all the things of like our defenses, our guards, that some of those experiences or challenges, like it really tears a lot of that down to where you are like most vulnerable and exposed because like you do get to like exhaustion, you do get to you've put in so much into this, you're dealing with your thoughts for so long, right?
hmm
During those events we can get into some pretty uh glimpse into like who we really are because all the other things that we may have wrapped around it or threw up as defenses or guards or all that can really take on a toll and beaten down by something like such a physical and mental, emotional,
hmm
spirit, all that challenge of an event such as this.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've never had anybody touch on it quite like that, but and challenge me to think about it that way, but you are 100% right because it was it was grueling. It was
Like
really,
comfort's
really
gone. Yeah, like a sense of
everything.
comfort. Like I'm
Yeah.
just gonna stop and quit, or like there's just a
Yeah.
lot that puts you in that spot where you have to really like you kind of face who you are without all the things that we
hmm
may have used to protect, cover, self-preservation, right? The way I
hmm
look at it. And to me, I can only imagine when you're also going through what you were going through and not having like this training, like that must have been just even on almost like hyperdrive
Yeah.
for an experience.
But that is the pride of the alcoholic. I will do anything to save face. I mean, I didn't even know how to use every gear on my bike. And I wasn't going to ask for help. And, the fake it till you make it. I don't know. But I spent all day on that bike, and a lot of times you couldn't talk. You know, if we got on a quiet country road for a while, we could relax a little bit and ride, in pairs. And that was great. But a lot of times you were single file and you couldn't wear, you know, headphones very much. And you just had this time to think. And alls I did was like, I can't drink when I get home. Are you going to drink when you get home? I'm not going to drink. I don't think I'm going to drink. It was just constant. It's all I thought about how I was going to handle it. And I think in my heart of hearts, I knew I was going to drink when I got home. I had no plan, and I didn't feel like it was going to be miraculously removed from me when I got home. I
Yeah,
was just going
Hallmark Hallmark story has you doing this cycling event and
to, hmm
you're sober and then everything is now like this in the
hmm
distance of recovery and but that didn't happen after the first time doing this
No.
event.
In fact, I tried to do this bike ride. I did it three more times
Yeah.
before, as a woman still stuck in addiction. And those bike rides became kind of my lifeline in the summer. I didn't know. I mean, they kept me from drinking a ton in the summer because summers were dangerous. And I didn't know how else to do summer. and on time. So you can't just train and then say, well, but I'm not going to do that bike ride, you know? And I became very close to the people that I was doing it with. So the hard part is, then somewhere in there, I get sober and I don't get to come back and say to my teammates for those last 2 years, well, now I'm doing it sober. I had no one to celebrate that with. And that's really, really sad because those last two bike rides for me were incredibly different, not just physically, but especially spiritually. It was, I was so free. And there was so many times everything moved me to tears. Creation, accomplishment, everything. And as much as I had to keep my secret to myself before, I kept this a secret too. And that's should have been celebrated.
Yeah, that's and then that's even with people all around you, your teammates, you know, and even in a close thing like that, we can still feel alone. We can still feel in secrecy, even when we're in such a tight-knit, group like that, where we are
Mm-hmm.
facing a challenge that, you know, breaks us down entirely. it, there's still ways that we still have our secrets and we still feel lonely even when people are right next to us. Pretty close
Exactly.
proximity. Some of the hotels you were staying at and on the bike rides, like
Yeah.
it wasn't, you know, hundreds of people, but it was still close proximity with people and yet still having some disconnection even when people were like right there.
Hmm. Yeah. So when the book was going to be published, I had to get their permission because some of them are in the book, by name. And that was hard because I had to hand them the manuscript and say, here you go. I felt really naked. And most of them were sad because it was like, I had no idea. Or I suspected or I'd heard a rumor, but I didn't know what to think. And I couldn't see that in you so it was really eye-opening for all of us. And it just shows as Christians how much what we'll do to hide our secrets and how much we will let shame keep us quiet. I was so ashamed and I wasn't willing to let anybody see my secret sin. And it was almost like these bike trips were a vacation from my sin.
Yeah, that's it.
And
It's so interesting because the chapter 15 tropical storm, Hermione, you were talking
yeah.
about one of the things I underlined was I'm excited to be done, but I'm also scared to leave the security bubble of the bike ride. I thought that was a
Hmm.
really great thing that you mentioned because to some people not seeing it or experiencing it are like, things are so, why do you do that? That's so painful, or doesn't that hurt, or the consequences, or I don't understand how someone would continue even though it's doing this. But I've always approached some of the issues with like addiction is with like a grief and loss model that we also like we go through a loss when people stop, using a substance or engaging in a behavior that everyone else looks at as like you should give this up because there's a lot of benefits, or you should give this up because it's hurting you so much that we don't always think about that by giving up something or by no longer having it, it is a loss that did provide something. I
Hmm.
always, I always say behavior to the person makes sense to them. Like they're acting a certain way that they, whether right or wrong, the impact it's having to them, they see it as it's serving a purpose, right? Like it's doing something, and without it, there's a fear of what will happen or what might occur. So when I
Hmm.
read that part about, being excited to be done, but also scared to leave the security bubble of the bike ride, I think a lot of people will connect to even things that they know that they're doing that's going on is causing issues or problems. That there is a part that is a fear of no longer having that.
Hmm.
And I don't think we allow a lot of space for that because then I think people worry that like, oh, well, it's then you're encouraging it. And part of me is like, no, I just want to know. Sometimes there's a fear of what they're about to give up. And if you can
Mm-hmm.
help them go through that, that would be helpful versus trying to, because if you come at it the other way and you try to attack it, then what happens? They get defensive, then they start to support that when it's like, no, let's just
Mm-hmm.
kind of look at this is doing something for them. How can we help understand what they're not getting in other ways that they feel like they're getting from this?
Mm-hmm.
So curious, how you take some of that.
I, first of all, I do really, I connect with the analogy of, comparing it to grief because when you give up a substance, and in my case, alcohol, so I'm just going to refer to that one, that I've been married, I've known my spouse since I was 15 years old. If something were to happen to him today, abruptly taken away from me, I would have to learn how to do life in a whole new way because he is my best friend. We do everything together. And all of a sudden, it's gone. Life is going to look very different, is my main point. Same with alcohol. It's gone. It is not my go-to. I, in the same way, I don't get to speak to my husband first thing in the morning. I don't get to take a drink. And it's the same. I mean, it's not the same thing as far as, a person versus a substance, but the loss and the adjustment, it's hard. And the best thing that I believe we can do about that in both cases, I think it's community because what I was going through was so isolating and I did it to myself. I didn't know there was some trust there too, but I honestly couldn't think of one person who could relate to what I was going through. There was no one. And when you are in that space of where I was, and again, I experienced grief. I talk about it in the book, the loss of my brother. I remember, and I don't know if I talk about, so I think it was 4 years previous to the loss of my brother. My dad and my stepmom, her son died. So this is my stepbrother. And so my stepsisters had gone through the same thing that my sister and I had. And I remember being at the funeral home when my brother was killed, and all these people are there, and they all are saying things, and I could have cared less. I was watching the door. I wanted my stepsisters to walk in. I could not wait to see them because they knew how I felt. And that's what I was looking for when I was trying to figure out how to get out of where I was, or even when I was newly sober. Like, how do I do this? And I didn't know, I couldn't find that person. And that's where I believe community is so important in recovery is, finding those people that you can relate to that can say, I have stood right where you are. Here's what you're going to do today. And I'm here to tell you that you can do this and it is going to get better and it's going to hurt for a little while. And remember, being told that in grief and they're going to be honest with you. But when someone says to you, um, that has never been through either of those circumstances, has no idea how you feel, but tries to give you advice or something, we all know how that feels. You let it go in one ear and out the other, and you can't wait to get away from them,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Because a lot of times it's not advice people are searching for
no,
or
I
wanting.
mean,
Like it's you can find that in a lot of areas, but there's advice isn't guarantee of connection, I would say.
no.
Like you could have someone in silence give you more connection than someone
Hmm.
who's trying to give unsolicited advice or something that
Hmm.
there is no connection. And I
Yeah.
think that's where a lot of it is. And you mentioned shame before, which to me, shame is really like that disconnection where to me it's like a pretty fragile, it's like a string. I
Mm-hmm.
guess going back to this yarn thing, but like it's a string where that shame just feels like an automatic like someone cut that connection and
Mm-hmm.
how we feel now like separated from someone and that's really hard. So and that's when people are looking for community support, it's not because they're short on advice. It's
Right.
like
We don't need advice.
as a counselor, I always try to be someone that's trying to not be like a lot of other people in someone's life. Like I always like when people come to me and they've got someone who's a probation officer, like I'm sure your probation officer is giving you advice or telling you what to do, or you've got someone else in your life doing that. Like I'm purposely trying not to be that person because you've got
Mm-hmm.
those, right? We've
Mm-hmm.
got it, everyone, giving advice or what to do or
Mm-hmm.
how to do it. I think what people need more is that space to connect, to be vulnerable, to be able to acknowledge things without, fear of what someone else might say or respond to, and just know that like I'm not going to judge you, not going to tell you what to do. I just want you to be able to share what you're going through, and that's a good start.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good place
Yeah.
to be.
Even though my husband was not, he didn't know what it was like to be giving up a substance. I mean, he was in a recovery all in his own different kind, but he was the only one that was present with me going through this. And I would say to him, I know I'm venting, or I know I'm not easy to be with right now. And he's like, tell me what to do. And I'm like, I don't need you to do anything. And I don't need you to fix it. I just need you to sit with me. I just need you to be here. I just need you to listen. But I know you can't fix it. But I just need to know I'm being heard right now, because that's all I got. And that's all that most of us are asking for. Just be with
Yeah.
me. Just, you know, and tell me it's going to be okay. And, keep me strong, keep me accountable. But most of the time, yeah, we're definitely not looking for advice.
When I don't want to I want readers to be able to, read the book and get to more of your story. But the truth of the matter is the cycling wasn't the answer to all end all.
Mm-mm.
It was a very important part and it really had its importance in your life, in your story, but it wasn't like we said, the hallmark story wasn't that you just went on this ride and then this transformation happened. You went on several rides, but it wasn't the story isn't just go on some cycling and that's the answer.
Buy a
That
bike, find God,
that
throw away the booze.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's not how things have ended for you. So, and there's some other things you've been doing. So, when the book
Yeah.
was finished and when that came out, what else has been going on that all this has led you to doing?
Yeah. Well, I do talk about it in the book too. And that's why I really want people to read it. I did come to the end of my drinking. And again, it had nothing to do with the bike. And after that, um, I call it my surrender moment. I was quiet for a while. I didn't know what to do next. And um I wanted to talk to other women like myself, like kind of like we just talked about. And I couldn't find them. I was like stalking online and looking for, I went to some groups and it wasn't my thing. And so I started writing. I wrote a little blog I prayed no one would ever read. And someone did. And I just started connecting with women a little bit that way, but not a whole lot. But eventually, someone that I used to work with at this pregnancy center, they were sponsoring an event called Get Real, and they asked me to teach a workshop. or talk at a workshop about my story. And I was like, are you nuts? I don't talk about that in public. And she said, I remember you saying to God when you surrendered, I'll do whatever you want, whatever you ask of me. And I'm like, I told God that, not you. And she's like, I'm holding you to it. And I did it. It was the hardest thing I ever did. And but by the time I got home, I had an email and it was from a woman and she said, me too. Can we talk? And that was kind of the start. And so I started a ministry, fast forward, called She Surrenders. And that has a website all its own, shesurrenders.com. And there's some things on there that women can connect to. There's a forum, there's a meeting, there's a lot of blogs to read. And that was still going on. And that went on for quite a few years. And our family went through another addiction with a close family member. That was really, really hard. And from my experience and the one with her, we learned we were up against a wall as to where's the help? We're Christians. We believe the answer lies in our faith. And um, we were looking for faith-based recovery. And the recovery program that we used when we sent her wasn't a good fit. It was a terrible experience, actually. And I shouldn't say terrible experience. It was a disappointing experience. Long story short. Um, and I want to write about this part of the story someday too, because it's so cool how it all came to be. Um, my husband and I really felt on our hearts that we were supposed to do something about that. And we put ourselves out there to God and said, if you show us, we'll be obedient. And not very much time went by and he showed us this wonderful house that went up for sale and we bought it. And about 2 years later, after renovations and all the things that need to happen, we opened Selah House Recovery, which is a 30-day residential program for women. And it's totally faith-based recovery. And it's 30-day inpatient. And then after that, it's a 10-day outpatient that um, it gives us the ability to connect with them every day for the first 10 days as that transition happens going back home.
That's
And
great.
it's really, it's going so well. And we've seen women find just this new freedom and this new joy in Christ. Our curriculum is based on the fruit of the Spirit. I wrote it, and teach it. And I've never, ever loved what I'm doing more than I do right now. So it's fabulous. Our whole family's on board. My daughter-in-law and I run it actually. And yeah, it's happening.
That's incredible. Yeah. And I'm sure that's not what you were thinking of, that was
No,
all going to lead to this
never.
and all that.
I was just like, let's just quit drinking and put this behind us. Nobody has to know. That was my idea. But I'm glad that God had a different idea because I couldn't love life more than where it is right now. And that's what I want women to know. I thought that, it was going to be, with the book, that's where I could get that message out there. But God continues to open doors for me to share that message. And that's the message I want women to know. It's so much better over here.
Yeah, that's amazing. All right, I have one question before I'll ask you like your final takeaway or what you want to share with the audiences.
Okay.
Are you still bike riding?
So, yes and no. Can I answer it two ways?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Because I have a really good reason why I'm not.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
okay, so up till last summer, uh, 2 summers ago, and I gotta think now, it was 2 years ago this past March, I had foot surgery.
Mm,
So that took me off my road bike because I
yeah,
couldn't clip in and out. And by the
sure.
end of the summer, I was able to ride a normal bike. And I get teased, but I fell in love with it because
Nice.
it's just, I got to get so many miles in, or I got to go so fast, or whatever. I bike because I enjoy it now. And I
Yeah,
also don't like to bike on the road. I'm sorry. People are too irresponsible. They're looking at their phones, they're not paying attention. So I pretty much only bike on trails now, and road bikes aren't
that's
real
awesome.
welcome
Yeah.
on trails. So, and I
No,
like to ride my bike to work, and that work Sailor House is only a couple miles away. So I'm that person with
that's
their bike
amazing.
basket.
Yeah.
And I just, yeah, so I haven't ridden my road bike very much the last couple of years. And there's been talk about doing um, a, a ride for life, like a resurrecting it, like an anniversary ride. And I just stay quiet when people bring that up because I have no desire to. So, interestingly, though, my son-in-law and my daughter-in-law both did the Ride for Life, and they're the ones that are more excited about that idea than me. So, we'll see what happens.
No, it's great. I love that because it did play such a important part of your story, but also like it transformed into something much greater than that, and you're still doing it in a way that's meaningful to you and has its purpose that I think we sometimes get real stuck on things. We can identify with things and when things sometimes don't go that way or we go through injury or we just go through like a change that even things like the bike ride is different now than it
Mhm.
was before, but it still has purpose and meaning and still played a large part of your story. So it's great to hear how it transformed and became something now and riding it to work and the trails. I like seeing. I go to some trails where there's bikes too, and it's amazing to see how that looks. I'm running on them while they're going
Mhm.
up and down on things, and their tires are like as
Yeah.
wide
Yeah.
as me, and it's
Yeah. That's a
amazing.
big transition from as skinny as my tires used to be. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, those things are like, thin.
they're
It's
ridiculous.
amazing how
Yeah.
they work that way, but completely different. So, no, that's great to hear. I appreciate you sharing that part of it 'cause I had to
Yeah.
ask if that was still something that was a part of what you
Yeah.
do. So, we will have links to how listeners can find you, where they can learn more about everything you're doing, where they can get a copy of the book. So we'll have all that for them. So what would be your final takeaway or takeaways if you have a couple that you would
Mhm.
want to give audience members to close out?
You know, well, I could talk forever, as you've probably figured out, but I'm just really passionate about this. So I think the best thing for me to offer today is that I discovered that my favorite verse when I surrendered my drinking to God was Ephesians 3:20, that He will do more than you could ever ask or imagine. And in the beginning, when I discovered that verse and he restored my marriage, I thought, that's it. More than I could have ever asked or imagined because our marriage was over. It was not good. And it is so good now. We're like second marriage people, and I love it. And, then, I got a book deal. And then I was like, that must be it more than I could ever ask or imagine. And then I held my first grandchild. And I'm like, that's it. No. And then Sailor, I'm like, it just keeps coming. So I don't think in this lifetime I am going to ever understand the scope of more than we could ever ask or imagine. And that's not a verse that was just written for Sherry Hoppen. That was written for everybody. All of scripture is. So I invite that challenge to everybody listening, especially the woman that's wondering or thinking, because I know this train of thought, but you don't know me. You don't know my drinking, or you don't know how bad it is. I couldn't imagine going an hour without drinking back in the day. And the fact that I did and I rose above it, it's possible for you too, because it's a miracle, but it's something that God can do. And you just have to have the faith that it can happen. And He will do more than you could ever ask or imagine. Just got to get on board.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. And thanks for being a guest on the podcast. Thanks for everything you put into the book and the work that you're doing. It was a privilege to get to talk to you today and dive more into everything you're doing. So thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was truly a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so we'll have everything for audience members, and you'll learn about the rides, all the events, everything that was going on, and in a real authentic, if you're ever wondering what's going on with that person riding that bike, you have no idea when this is the story that's behind it. So I think people will get a real raw, genuine insight into what it's like for someone like yourself to go through this and then to now hear about the work that you're doing. So it'd be extremely valuable and important. So once again, thank you for everything, and we were very grateful you could join us and talk.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Talking Addiction and Recovery with Andrew J. Schreier. We're so glad you've joined us and invite you to connect further with the show and these topics at www.andrewjschreier.com. That's Andrew J. SCHREIER.com. You can also email us directly at talkingaddictionandrecovery@gmail.com and connect on social media, Instagram at Talking Addiction and Recovery, Facebook Talking Addiction and Recovery Podcast, and Twitter at TalkAR_podcast. To stay connected and never miss an episode, be sure to like, rate, and subscribe. Until next time, friends, let's keep talking addiction and recovery.